Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. On today's episode, I'm going to discuss the first two FIBA World Cup games for Jaren Jackson Jr. and also Santi Aldama. And I'm going to answer some listener questions I asked on Twitter from the Grits and Grinds account for some questions, and you guys delivered some quality questions. Not sure if I will get to them all. If I don't get to your question, I will hit it on a future episode. Once again, today's episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you want to try out Underdog Fantasy, remember to use that promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description, and Underdog Fantasy will match your opening deposit up to $100. If you're looking for some daily fantasy with the NFL season starting very, very soon, hit that up. Of course, when the NBA season starts, you will find me on there a lot, enjoying the offerings of Underdog Fantasy. Also, if you want to play fantasy football with me, I'm doing a fantasy football league for my Fast Break Breakfast Patreon supporters. That's also for Grits and Grinds, people who want to support the creation of this show. Our draft is going to be on Tuesday night before the NFL season starts on September 5th. So if you want to play in a fantasy football league with me, you have to join the Patreon at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out through social media, and I will get those questions answered for you. All right. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Team USA have won their first two group play games at the FIBA World Cup. They have not been challenged. They beat New Zealand and Greece. Both games they pulled away. Against New Zealand, they were down 14-4 early, but eventually had no problems. Jaren in that game fouled out. Unfortunately, he did have a really nice blow-by dunk in that game, so he made a highlight. He blocked a shot. He continues to be a crucial element for Team USA's defense. He's basically the only rim protector. He has affected and changed a lot of shots. If you watch the exhibition games, this has been the case. So far in the two group play games, absolutely, he is affecting a lot of what happens in the interior. He's made all of his two-point attempts so far. They normally give him a post touch early in each half. Hasn't really done a lot from the perimeter outside of that dunk I just mentioned. He did make a three-pointer in the game against Greece, but he banked it in, and it was definitely not on purpose. So, whoops there. But Jaren so far has been very effective on defense. He had an unbelievable sequence against Greece where he blocked two shots in just a few seconds. In that first half against Greece, he had 2 blocks, 2 steals, and also 2 offensive rebounds. He finished the Greece game with 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Against New Zealand, he had 12 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 block. And again, he hasn't played very much in either game because the games have been blowouts and they haven't gone back to the starters at the end. And the third and final game of group play is against Jordan in the middle of the night, Central Time, Tuesday night. And I don't expect Team USA to be challenged very much in that game. So Jaren's looking, again, one of the important players. He hasn't necessarily been a star of the games yet. Like we've seen Jalen Brunson have big games. Paolo Banchero's had big games. Austin Reeves has been awesome. Jaren right now kind of unspectacularly holding down the fort as the most important big man on the roster. I mean, he has made his highlights. Again, the block shots against Greece, the dunk against New Zealand, very spectacular. Keep up the good work. Jaren, now Santi Aldama playing for Spain. Santi is like the ninth man for Spain, but he continues to make a big impact when he comes in. And again, Spain, kind of similar to Team USA, they haven't been that challenged. They did have a slightly closer game against Brazil, but they ended up pulling away and winning convincingly. In that game, Santi played the final 12 minutes. He ended up leading the team in scoring, actually. So I think he was the 10th guy in the game in the second half. He was the 5th guy to come off the bench, but ends up leading Spain with 15 points. He was top on the team in plus minus. Of course, single game plus minus is meaningless, except for when we're using it to highlight the players we like. So a plus 28 for Santi against Brazil. Also had a few rebounds, got an assist. In Spain's first game against the Ivory Coast, he blocked 3 shots, got 5 rebounds, and had 8 points. Santi continues to be a very important contributor for Spain. Their third game is against Iran and our old friend Hamed Haddadi, who, by the way, I found out just recently he's 38. I assumed Hamed Haddadi was 50 years old. Apparently, he's just 38. He's much younger than me. But Spain and Santi play Hamed Haddadi on a Wednesday morning, our time. Spain's expected to advance easily past Iran. And then going into the knockout stages, it's going to be quite the battle. Yes, France, one of the early favorites, has been eliminated, but Team USA, Spain looking good. Lithuania has done well. Jonas Valanciunas has led them, and they've won all 3 of their matches. And, of course, Canada looks incredible. Canada has been destroying everyone, so it looks like we're on a collision course possibly with Team USA in Canada, although I don't want to overlook Spain, and I don't want to overlook Slovenia with Luka Doncic. They've won all of their games. The knockout stages should be very, very interesting. We'll keep watching that. Of course, join me at playback.tv/fastbreakbreakfast. I'm watching a lot of those games over there, and we can react and watch those games together. All right, now the listener questions, very, very good ones. Very, very appreciated as we look for topics in this offseason time. Beyond the FIBA play, there's really nothing going on for the Grizzlies. There's literally social media clips of our players working out. Like, oh, Gigi Jackson's working out with John Morant and David Roddy. All right. Josh Christopher put out another highlight clip of him making shots in an open gym situation. I guess we can talk. There was these photos, and it's a deliberate campaign, you can tell, by John Morant to put out these workout pictures where he's wearing shirts. They're white T-shirts that have single words written on them. The words have been gratitude, rebirth, and accountability. Now, this is just to get people hyped and change the narrative or whatever. It's obviously a PR play. I hope it works out better than the Team Morant redemption hoodie did last season. But, I mean, obviously good to see your players working on their craft, but just because they posted on social media, that doesn't do much for me. But let's get to your questions. Parker Fleming, our buddy Parker Fleming, asks, what is your 10-man rotation for the first 25 games of the year? Great question, Parker. We've talked about this on the show before. For me, it keeps changing, even though we have no new information. Just the more I think about it, I keep kind of maybe changing my mind a little bit. Here's what I'm going to do to answer Parker's question. My official answer at the end of August is I'm going to start Luke Kennard. I know I've released episodes weeks ago where I was like, you know what? I don't think I can start Luke Kennard. I think I need one guard I trust on the bench. But I'm going to start Luke Kennard now. So my starting lineup is going to be Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams. I think starting my best 5 players, hey, that's a novel concept. I do recognize that this team maybe has a history of choosing not to start their 5 best players. This was particularly painful to me in the playoffs in 2022 when we started Xavier Tillman, even though we knew we wanted to get to Brandon Clark in the game. And I was kind of upset that it's like, hey, we want to maximize the amount of time, we can have our best 5 guys on the court together. So for this exercise, to answer this question, that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my best 5 players. Also, I think a benefit of doing it this way, it gets the team, I think, accustomed to the defensive roles that are going to be needed or played once Ja Morant gets back. When Ja Morant plays alongside Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren, and Steven, he's going to be guarding the least threatening guard option. If we start Luke Kennard in the place of Ja Morant, Luke Kennard will guard the weakest guard option. I think you'll have Desmond Bane probably guarding. If you have a particularly good point guard, I think Desmond Bane will probably check him, and Marcus Smart will be on the biggest wing threat. There will be defensive matchup difficulties with this lineup. Guess what? Once Ja Morant comes back, there will be defensive matchup difficulties. But I just go back to, I'm going to start my best 5. Maybe I want to play super huge, and I'm interested in the idea of, let's keep Kennard on the bench and we'll start Santi Aldama at the 3. Or I have all these small forwards. I'm trying to figure out who's going to contribute. Let's start David Roddy or Zaire Williams or Jake LaRavia or Vince Williams Jr. at the 3. Yeah, I still think it's likely they do that. But today, I've changed my mind. To answer this question, I'm going to start Luke Kennard. So that leaves me my bench. And we're going to fill out a 10-man rotation. I know I'm going to play Santi Aldama. And I know I'm going to play Xavier Tillman. So my front court coming off the bench, that's set. Santi and Xavier. Apologies to Junior Lofton. Now I have 3 spots left. I don't like now the options I have, honestly. I didn't really initially want to start Luke Kennard because now I'm stuck with, I don't really trust any of my guards. I don't trust Derrick Rose at all. However, Derrick Rose is going to be on my second unit. Also, they are going to play Derrick Rose on their second unit. At the very least, for the first home game, they're going to play Derrick Rose. They're not going to have Derrick Rose do a DMP coach's decision in those first 2 home games against the Pelicans and Nuggets as they kick off the season with their season ticket holders excitedly waiting to see Derrick Rose's Memphis debut. So I will concede, all right, we're playing Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is our backup point guard. That leaves me now 2 slots. I got Derrick Rose and Santi Aldama and Xavier Tillman. I now have 2 slots for David Roddy, Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, or John Conchar. What I want to see happen in real life, like what am I hoping Taylor Jenkins does? I'll be honest. I don't care. Play any 2 of those 4 guys. That's cool. Let's see what happens. Pick any 2, see what happens. I officially do not have an opinion about who plays. I might prefer Vince Williams Jr., but that's only because I'm a weirdo. But I don't care what happens. For this exercise, if they ask me to pick, if Parker's asking me which 2 players am I picking of those 4, I'm going with John Conchar and Zaire Williams. Apologies, David Roddy. Apologies, Jake LaRavia. I'm going to let Roddy and LaRavia and Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. fight it out in practice. I am going to go with Zaire Williams because I got to get something from year 3, Zaire. I have to get something from him. I'm going to play Zaire Williams as part of my 10-man rotation until he forces me not to by being so ineffective or so terrible where I'm like, this guy cannot be played. But I got to find out. So I'm playing Zaire Williams, hoping he flashes back to his rookie year, hoping the work he's been putting in pays off. And then I'm playing John Conchar. He's my 10th man. Give me Jitty. He's a connective piece. The Grizzlies are always good when he's on the court. I value his rebounding. I value his passing. I assume he's going to bounce back with his 3-point shooting. It's going to be effective where it was not effective last year. He's going to be a regular season minutes eater. That works for me. So my 10-man rotation for the first 25 games, I'm starting Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, Jaren, and Steven Adams. And my bench is going to be Derrick Rose, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama, and Xavier Tillman. Do I like the 10-man I picked? Yeah, I do. Do I think that second unit is good? No. I think that second unit is horrifying, terrifying. But That's who I got on the roster, and that is who I am rolling with. Next question is from Corey, King C615 on Twitter. What is your prediction for the small forward position? I slightly addressed it in that last question, picking my rotation. My prediction is, frankly, I don't know. All right, let's be honest. I don't know. I think they're going to give Zaire Williams another shot. I think David Roddy is probably the leader as far as who's most likely to play the small forward. I do think there's a great chance that Luke Kennard, because of the reasons I specified, ends up starting. Now, he's not going to start necessarily as a small forward. He's going to be a guard. You would probably say that Bain or Smart are the small forward. But I do think that Roddy probably has the leg up. I think Zaire, we hope we see a bounce-back season. And I think they have this motivation to see what they have in him. Otherwise, you got to move on. So I think Zaire will certainly get another opportunity. Can LaRavia or Vince Williams Jr. rise up and compete for that? Maybe LaRavia is more of a 4. I don't know, but I think Roddy absolutely has the lead as far as who's going to play the most minutes out of small forward, outside of, say, Marcus Smart or the people who will start. But it does remain a big question, and it's hard to answer. Also, some other questions you guys asked, I absolutely have no answer. Bertram Burner 2 asked, will Steven Adams be 100% at the start of the season? What are reasonable expectations for Steve-O? I have no idea. Doesn't seem like anyone knows if Steven Adams is going to be 100% at the start of the season. I did hear, by the way, from some New Zealand and Australian listeners that clip I posted on a recent episode about a Australian radio host talking about how he talked to somebody close to Steven Adams and said he was misdiagnosed by the Grizzlies training staff. They all said that radio host is not a very serious person that you should pay attention to. So I will take it from the Australian and New Zealand listeners of Grits and Grinds that we don't need to put a lot of stock in that rumor. Another question I don't have the answer to is from Dan Donnellan, 24. He says, why hasn't Gigi Jackson signed a contract yet? Are we just waiting to see if we can get in on the Dame and Harden trades? I can answer the second part of the question. No, I don't think we're waiting to see if we can get in the Dame and Harden trades. I don't think signing Gigi Jackson would have any effect on that whatsoever. Zach Kleiman has said he's going to have a 2-way contract. I don't know why he hasn't signed the 2-way contract. I don't know anyone who knows a reason why he hasn't signed the contract. I also have asked a couple people, and no one can think of a reason. What's the benefit for the Grizzlies not signing Gigi Jackson yet? So those two questions, will Steven Adams be at 100% at the start of the season, and why hasn't Gigi Jackson signed his contract yet? I have no idea. I apologize. If you find out the answer from someone else, please absolutely let me know. All right. Here is a fun question from Twitter user YOLO Gang 23. Which player would you prefer to start at the 3 if they actually added these things to their game this summer? This is a hypothetical. 1, Zaire with shooting 37% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. 2, LaRavia with point guard handles and vision. 3, Roddy with elite paint finishing. All right, Zaire who can shoot, Jake LaRavia who all of a sudden becomes a point guard, or David Roddy with elite paint finishing? It's easily Jake LaRavia as a point guard, right? I think these are funny because 1, all right, Roddy can make it a goal to have elite paint finishing. Zaire can make it a goal to hit 37%, slightly above average from 3. I don't think Jake LaRavia can become a guy with point guard handles and vision. Do I want Jake LaRavia to turn into Josh Giddey? Yeah, I'll take that. I don't trust my backup point guard in Derrick Rose. With Ja Morant out, we need a ball handler. I will choose your hypothetical of Jake LaRavia turns into a 6'9" ball handler. I guess second place would be Zaire making 3-pointers. If Roddy became an elite paint finisher, that's great. It's probably more important to have a floor spacer or a shooter on this team. So I would take either Zaire or Roddy if they can make 37% of their threes on 4 attempts per game. I mean, 4 attempts per game is not that many. Let's say they're playing 20 minutes a game. That's okay. But yeah, I would choose that. But fun question. Give me Jake LaRavia turning into Josh Giddey with maybe better post defense. Auto Q asks, is there a universe where Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best player on the Grizz? Yes. Right? Jaren might be the most important player on the Grizzlies. I don't know. It's a hard question. I think Ja Morant ceiling is top 10 player in the NBA. Jaren right now is probably a top 20 type of player in the NBA because of his combination of defense plus offense. If Jaren improves his offense, if his shooting becomes more consistent, I think you could see Jaren maybe becoming a more impactful overall player for the Grizzlies. There's a statistical argument that last year Jaren was a more impactful player to the Grizzlies than Ja Morant or Desmond Bane. Jaren probably had a bigger impact on winning. His on-off, plus-minus, all that, net rating swing when he's on the court, it showed that. Now, some of that is positional scarcity. There are more players who can do what Ja does than there are that can do what Jaren does. I'm not talking about Ja Morant's spectacular dunks and finishes. Almost no one, basically no one can do what Ja Morant does highlights-wise. But as far as point guards who can give you like 25 points per game, that is a more common NBA prototype than the unicorn of Jaren leading the league in block shots, also being able to score the basketball a little bit. Normally, players who can block as many shots as Jaren cannot also give you 18 points per game, cannot also give you whatever it is, 25 points per 36 minutes. That's a very rare combination historically. The combination of steals and blocks and made threes, also very rare historically. So I think there is an argument that Jaren is the single most important player to the Grizzlies' hopes. Of course, for the Grizzlies to win a title, you can't have one or the other. Like, you have to have Ja and Jaren and Desmond Bane and probably something else. So I think there is a universe, yes, where Jaren is the best player on the Grizz. It isn't right now. I think you can currently make the argument he's the most impactful, the most irreplaceable player on the Grizzlies. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's worth thinking about. As far as becoming the absolute best player, like in a vacuum, it's possible, but we are not there yet. He follows up his question, Auto Q does, with should the Grizzlies think about building around Jaren versus Ja while still keeping the other? So if you're keeping both of them, I don't think it really matters. The theoretical exercise, should the Grizzlies think about building around Jaren more than building around Ja? Obviously, I think the only reason you ever ask that question is because of what Ja is currently doing with his off-season difficulties. Like, can you depend on making all the moves for the perfect fit around Ja if you can't trust Ja's going to be on the court? That's the only reason why I think we entertain this question. And it's a hard one. And I don't know how you do it. Like, you wouldn't choose to build around Jaren because you have to move on from Ja. Like, the only path forward is to help Ja stay out of trouble and to get the most you can out of Ja. Like, you're not ever trading Ja. He's too important to business. He's too important to the NBA marketing. He's too important to your specific team marketing. And he's awesome. So you have to get Ja on the right path and then bring him in. As far as like, who do you build around one versus the other? Here's the fun part. You don't have to pick because they complement each other so well. Rim protector, shooter, interior big man, and then a prolific scoring highlight package of a point guard. They work great together. And again, that's why the Grizzlies ceiling is so good in theory once Ja Morant returns, is because all their best players, they're just perfect fits. Yeah, maybe you wish one of Ja or Bane would have a little better size so you could guard the other team's backcourts a little bit better. But having a guy who attacks in the paint, not a great shooter, but a 30-point per game scorer or so in Ja who attacks on the inside, and then pairing him with maybe the NBA's best current shooter in Bane at the 2, and then also a big man who protects the rim on defense and then can actually space the court on offense. Very good fits. Let's do a couple more questions, and we will do them right after this short break. I want to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is a whole new way to play fantasy sports for cash. My favorite way to play Underdog Fantasy is with their private drafts. Also, depending on the state you live, you can play higher or lower against their stat projections and really bring home some big paydays with their specials and multipliers. And of course, there's Fantasy Football Best Ball. Those lobbies are now open and busy as people get excited for the upcoming NFL season. So if all that sounds appealing to you, sign up now using promo code FBBF, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. That is promo code FBBF, as in Fast Break Breakfast, for a match of $100 on your first deposit. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy and use that code FBBF to get a free $100 on me. All right, we're answering some listener questions. Moises Laura asks, which 8 players would you protect on a future expansion draft? This is a super fun topic. It's been covered on a lot of podcasts. I don't mind answering the question and weighing in myself. This is pretty easy for the start. Everyone agrees. Like 1 through 3, Ja, Jaren, Desmond, done. Marcus Smart, done. If the doctors tell me Steven Adams is healthy, yeah, that's 5 right there. I'm keeping my starters, of course. I'm trying to win right now. I want to win a title this year, so I'm keeping Luke Kennard. Those are my 6 best players. I'm keeping all of my 6 best players. So now it becomes very, very difficult. We have 2 spots left. 2 spots left for Santi Aldama, for maybe my favorite player on the team, but who's hurt, and Brandon Clark. Then you have all the guys you drafted in the first round. You got Zaire Williams, you got Jake LaRavia, you got David Roddy, you have Xavier Tillman, you have John Conchar, Derrick Rose, you have Kenneth Lofton Jr. So 2 spots for all those guys. The ones I can throw out, which I think is pretty easy. I'm not protecting John Conchar. Honestly, I think I would rather get rid of his contract if I can, unfortunately. I'm not protecting Derrick Rose. Sorry, I'm not protecting Kenneth Lofton Jr. I'm not protecting Xavier Tillman. All right, Xavier Tillman is valuable to this team, but he's a 4th big. He is on an expiring contract. He's going to be a free agent next year. I doubt the Grizzlies pay him, so it seems pretty easy to me in this exercise. You got to leave Xavier Tillman unprotected. Would he get taken? Probably not, because you're also going to leave unprotected perhaps multiple of Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, and David Roddy. Now, I think we have to keep Santi Aldama, right? I don't think we're getting rid of Santi Aldama. Slim Spain, the Santi Christ, hanging on to him. So that's 7. And I don't think it's a controversial 7. Again, John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, Steven Adams, Luke Kennard, and Santi Aldama. Now, if Steven Adams, again, is hurt at all, I could see you leaving him exposed. But I don't want to lose Steven Adams. And I worry, the idea of an expansion draft, that feels like the kind of guy they would draft. Great culture guy, pretty solid medium-sized contract, bring him in. Just good for everything. So I would not want to leave him exposed in a theoretical expansion draft. So I have 1 choice left between basically the 3 guys who I drafted in the past couple of years in Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, and David Roddy. This goes back to the, do I care who the coaches pick to play? I really don't. I would probably keep Jake LaRavia out of the positional fit, the idea. I don't know. Now when I think about hypothetical fits, maybe Zaire Williams is the best, but Zaire Williams' sophomore year was so bad. I don't know what to do. I would probably protect Zaire Williams. I don't know. I mean, maybe the play here is leaving all 3 exposed, knowing that they're going to take one of them, probably. You know what? I I might have moved past Brandon Clark too quickly. Even though he's hurt, his extension is kicking in. I'm still keeping Brandon Clark. I'm going to hope Brandon Clark gets better. I'm going to keep that salary. I don't feel like I need to get off that extension totally. It's $13 million per year. If he can bounce back and be useful next year, if he's 90% of what he was, maybe that's optimistic, but if he's 90% of what he was, that's a very useful player. I don't think that contract is going to be a bad contract. It's a tough decision to choose an injured Brandon Clark over an uninjured but unproven young guy. I mean, David Roddy started games for you, played in the playoffs, was not particularly good in the playoffs at all. The year before, Zaire Williams started a bunch of games for you. Jake LaRavia, you traded up in the first round to pick him. He hasn't shown a lot, but maybe he's that, again, ideal connective piece, a la John Conchar. Not that Conchar is an ideal connective piece, but he's a connective piece. It's a very tough exercise. The way the Grizzlies have built their roster, they would be one of the teams where an expansion franchise would probably certainly end up taking a player off of them because they don't have a lot of bad contracts and they have a lot of young guys they've invested in. And then, of course, you're not going to leave exposed any of your main rotation guys if you can. So the Grizzlies, I think, particularly are a tough one for this exercise. I guess final answer, I'm going to leave Zaire, Jake, and David Roddy all exposed. I'm going to keep Brandon Clark and Santi Aldama to go with Luke Kennard, Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant. We'll do one more question. This is from Desert Squirrel. Favorite Grizzlies era and why? What a question. I'm going to make this hyper specific because if we just do like big eras, like the grit and grind era, that's too large. I can't do the grit and grind era versus the current era, the Taylor Jenkins, John Morant era versus like the Pau Gasol era. I'm going to try to narrow it down into like little couple season pockets. And here are my 3 favorite 2-season spans. One, the first 2 years the Grizzlies were any good. The Pau Gasol years, the like 04, 05, 06, around there. Let me make sure I got my seasons exactly right. No, I'm going to go 2003 to 2005. This is the Pau Gasol, Shane Battier teams where you had Mike Miller, you had James Posey, you had Stromos Swift was on these teams. Wes Person was on these teams. Jason Williams, Lorenzen Wright. I love these teams. Up and down the roster, I thought they were very, very good. They got a little bit unlucky with their playoff draws each year, but they were really, really good. They were really, really fun, and I love these squads. Next is going to be the peak of the grit and grind era. We're going to say that's like 2013 through 2015. This is the year they lost in 7 games. This is a tough one because maybe I could have taken the very first year of grit and grind because that was awesome as well. But I'm gonna take it when Marc Gasol has basically become the best player on the team. Maybe he's passed Zach Randolph for being the best player. So you have the core 4. This is the year they traded Jared Bayless for Courtney Lee as the start of it. I was not a huge fan of Jared Bayless. I found him very, very frustrating. I liked when they got Courtney Lee. This is after Rudy Gay's moved on. We have Tayshaun Prince. We have Ed Davis. You have Mike Miller has returned. That 2013-14 squad, which lost in the first round in 7 games to the Thunder. This is the series where Zach Randolph got suspended for game 7. That squad, top to bottom, was incredible. Unbelievably good roster. James Johnson, of course, on this roster. And then the next year, they made it to the conference semifinals, lost to the Warriors as the Warriors won their first title. That was an elite squad. Absolutely adored those couple years. And then my next favorite era that I'm going to pick between was 2 years ago, was the 56-win Grizzlies team, the team that had my favorite bench lineup ever, the team that had Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton coming off the bench with Ja and, of course, Jaren and Desmond starting. That year, this one I'm picking between, and honestly, I think my favorite Grizzlies era ever was just 2 years ago. Is this the same era? So like, is this the same era? It doesn't feel like it. It feels like we're in a slightly new era now. Obviously there's been the off-court stuff with Ja Morant, which maybe that kind of switches the era. But like, Tyus Jones is not here anymore. Dylan Brooks is not here anymore. Kyle Anderson, D'Anthony Melton gone, of course. I think the roster 2 years ago, I'm worried when we look back on it, we say, wow, that was the most talented roster they had. I mean, Brandon Clark, I didn't even mention Brandon Clark. Like Brandon Clark, the bench of Kyle Anderson, Brandon Clark, D'Anthony Melton, and Tyus Jones, that is an unbelievably good 6 through 9. Like an outrageously good depth chart, 6 through 9 on your team. And I think right now, that is my favorite era. I'm not nostalgic for it. It hasn't been enough time that's passed. Like, I'm nostalgic for the early Powell years where we had Bonzi Wells and James Posey and Battier and Mike Miller, like so many cool wings. Honestly, that roster might work even better today. I love that squad. I love the peak of the grit and grind years. But I don't know, man. I adored all of our best players and then was absolutely enamored with most of our bench. And perhaps that was my favorite Grizzlies era. Thanks for the question. I think that was everything. Actually, there's one more question from Baden Kuehler. He says, what do you think Smart's role will be during Ja's suspension and after? Are you worried about Ja's return after the team builds the chemistry on the court with Smart? I think Marcus will be the primary playmaker when Ja is out. Although maybe we get an even split with Bane. I do think Marcus's assist averages from last year are going down. Like he averaged 6.3 assists per game on the Celtics last year. I think that goes down, one, because he's going to be playing fewer minutes. He's also going to be playing with less potent offensive options. There's no Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on this team to buoy those assist numbers. Once Ja comes back, I think he's going to just fit in just fine. And no, I'm not worried about the chemistry and the on-the-court stuff when it's Ja and Smart and Bane. No, I think it's going to be really, really good. I don't think having that many ball handlers is a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. So I think before Ja comes back, Smart's role is going to be primary ball handler, and also he's going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting on defense. I have concerns about asking him to do too much offense plus defense, but once Ja comes back, I think it's going to be a very smooth fit, very, very few concerns. All right. Well, those were your questions, and I appreciate everyone who sent in a question. Again, if you want to play fantasy football with me, head over to patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Don't forget that promo code at Underdog Fantasy, FBBF, and they'll match your first $100. All right. Hope you guys have a great Tuesday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.